Liza Bernstein is a 3-time breast cancer survivor who first fought the disease before the age of the internet. Diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 29, Bernstein researched books tirelessly, worked the telephone, and connected with people in person, struggling for answers. She realized how important it was for patients to feel empowered during their disease experience and to feel connected with others. Today, with the help of social media, Bernstein is able to connect with more patients so they can work on beating their disease together. So you're a 3-time survivor of breast cancer. Can you take me back to that first time when you were diagnosed? How did you feel?
When I went for this biopsy, I didn't even understand what breast cancer was. There's no cancer in my family. People had had heart disease and cholesterol, issues like that. No cancer whatsoever. I knew I had a lump, and I knew it had to be biopsied. So it was very surreal. But when I woke up in the recovery room, the surgeon was holding my hand, and he had this look on his face of just such kindness and compassion. He was so gentle, and he said, "I'm so sorry, it's cancer." And I remember that there were tears coming down my face, but I was in the morphine cloud. So I totally understand why people become addicted to drugs like that, because I felt like I was in this cocoon on a cushion, but at the same time something in my mind understood because I had tears running down my face. So in the moment, that's what that was like.
And then after you went home, I'm sure you started researching, and this was all before the age of when internet communities became very popular.
Right.
So tell me a little about your search for information.
I just started reading books. I started asking questions. One thing led to another, and after a terrible experience with an initial oncologist who was a very old school model and basically just dismissed me, I was still on drugs. It was just 10 days after the surgery. I go to see him, and he says, "No, you're fine. You don't need chemo. You don't need anything." I was 29 years old at the time. The surgeon, the radiation oncologist that I had already seen, were both incredibly concerned and said, "Most likely you will get chemo because of your young age." I'd been reading. I found out about this drug, tamoxifen. Didn't really know what it was, but knew that it was an important drug. And so I said to this oncologist, after he said to me, "Okay, you're fine," I said, "Well, what about tamoxifen? Is that a drug I should take?" And he said, "You want to take tamoxifen?" Well, okay. He's like, "Okay, I'll just write your prescription." Very odd. Anyway, went for a second opinion, found an oncologist who I'm still with today since 1994. Her name is Philomena McAndrew, Dr. McAndrew in Los Angeles. And she modeled for me by being open to me, giving me 2 hours and then some at the first consult. She modeled for me what a collaborative relationship with a patient should be. And so that's part of my e-patient journey, came out of meeting her. And she explained my pathological report to me and showed me that there was something very alarming in it, potentially alarming, that at least needed to be looked at again. And I had read that report myself. I'd gotten hold of the notes from the doctors, and I'm no scientist, but I could tell there was something that wasn't sitting right with me, but I didn't know how to interpret it. She sat with me, and showed me the report and said, "You see this sentence here where it says there's a risk of I think it's something like, a risk of vascular invasion." And she explained what that meant, that if any cancer cells had invaded, even if one cancer cell had invaded my blood flow, my blood system, it could run around and go and metastasize somewhere else. So she said, "I'm going to reorder all your slides. We're going to get everything looked at." But she taught me that it was not only okay, but really mandatory for you to be aware of what your results were, know how to ask questions, not be afraid to do so, and so on and so forth.
And what can physicians do that will make patients feel more empowered and help them feel more empowered?
In an ideal world, it sounds so simple. Listen, and treat the person as a person, a human being, and not view them through this lens of patient, because I think that word patient has a bad name, and it's linked to the notion of hypochondriac in some situations. Meanwhile, every person has a story, and the doctor too. And I understand they have crazy work schedules and everything. So, at the end of the day, it's about respect and listening.
Right. And eventually, you turned to social media as a way to connect with others. Can you tell me what role social media played in your journey with this disease?
Oh, it has changed my life. Interestingly enough, I really embraced social media after I was done with all three of my cancers. I had the second one in 2005, and before that I had looked online, and it just didn't work for me, the communities that I found online. Support groups, in-person support groups, didn't really work that well for me either. So during the time when I could have really benefited from social media as an active patient dealing with my treatment and all of that, I wasn't using social media. But in 2010, I had been diagnosed for the third time in 2009. So in 2010, I turned to Tumblr as an experiment because I had such PTSD around October, which is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and it's, I think, a little known fact that most breast cancer survivors hate October.
It's understandable. You're flooded with breast cancer information.
Exactly, and all these triggers and reminders, but that's the topic of a whole another story. But for once, at that point was maybe 14 years, I found myself feeling like, okay, I can kind of handle this. I had met a woman at my oncology office in the lobby who was very distraught, and we talked, and I found myself in several situations mentoring other new patients. And this particular woman said to me, I just can't stand this October thing. I'm a wreck. Everyone in my family tells me to just, I should be over this by now. I should be better. But, even though my treatment's behind me, I'm not better inside. And that got me thinking, well, maybe I can help, maybe I can contribute beyond just one-on-one with people. So I experimented with Tumblr just for myself to see if I could post a few things around breast cancer and Breast Cancer Awareness Month from my perspective. And then I found Twitter, and then the rest is history. And so how has it helped me in my journey? I think mainly it's helped me by giving me a way to give back, use all the things that I've been through, every experience that I've had, and give it meaning. When you've gone through such suffering, there's, it's like, why me? Why not me? There's no meaning for it, and you can easily become disillusioned and lose faith and what have you. So my approach to life is, well, what can I make of this? So Twitter and being online has allowed me not only to give back, but to meet and be inspired by the most amazing people, both within the breast cancer community who are survivors and patients, but also doctors, researchers, caregivers, other people in the medical community, and it feels like at this point there's a movement happening that somehow I'm a part of.
Yeah, and so you would advocate for other patients to also get online, participate in this community?
Well, I would. The only thing is, it's not for everyone. So people do have to find what works for them. But I think going forward, especially with, millennials, and because the thing is, so many young women get breast cancer. So many young people get other kinds of cancers. It's not just, for me at this point, also about breast cancer. We've had so much wonderful attention being put on breast cancer that it's time for us to share that now with the people who call themselves the orphan cancers. And so using the online tools is incredibly easy, but some people might need some training or some mentoring and some assistance, and so hopefully going forward we can find that. There was this really interesting statistic in the last 2 weeks where there was a study, I wish I could remember it, but a study that said that people were more likely to confess intimate things via text message than in person. And that's, I think, what happens with Twitter, where I noticed from the difference between sitting in a room, in a support group with all of these people, who all of us are going through our own stuff. There's so much emotion in the room that it can be overwhelming. Whereas on Twitter, there are the most raw and real exchanges happening, but it's also possible to sit back and breathe and to reach out to one another and connect in ways that I find not possible in person. And then, sorry, I keep going on, but after that, the other incredible thing is, after meeting people like this on Twitter, then meeting in real life and forming true collaborations, relationships, friendships, working relationships in Alt for Change.
I think that was really good insight, that on Twitter there's that distance, there's that anonymity that the internet affords you, but then you can actually go and make those into real relationships, into real support.
Yeah, and one of the
That's very
pieces of advice that
important.
I've given to newbies, for instance, is that you can be on Twitter anonymously until you're comfortable to put your name there. But even if you're anonymous, you can still have authentic interactions as long as you are being authentic.